We just got up early, do a quick video. We're gonna get out, we're gonna show you how to stroke a jig. Let's get at it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. I got up early to give you guys an on the water seminar. I'm up at my parents' cabin in the Hayward, Wisconsin area, and it's beautiful. It's October 2nd, and the low last night was 62 degrees. Water temps are still in the low to mid 60s, almost summer type fishing still, which is really unheard of this time of year. So we're gonna try to catch a couple of fish, stroking a jig for you. It's one of my favorite ways to fish. Really good way to get those fish that are inactive to bite, and it's a really good way to take advantage of active fish because you can cover a ton of water and it gets you a lot of good bites. And you can do it almost anywhere around the country. You know, you can do it out on ledges down south, you can do it in weeds, you can do it on weed lines, you can do it on rock bars. Really, you can stroke a jig anywhere you want to do it because it is a really good way at generating those bites. From a tackle perspective, I do have a pretty good setup in terms of the rod and reel choice that I like to use. From a rod standpoint, I like a fast action, medium heavy rod, one that is almost, you know, really just made, not a broomstick by any means, but one that doesn't have a ton of parabolic bend in it, because when you snap it, you want to create an explosion off the bottom. And if you're using a softer rod, what's going to happen is your rod's going to load up and you're not going to get that great explosion off the bottom. So this is a MHX rod build that I've done, NB 874, so it's a 7.3 4 power. You know, it's a fast action, really good rod for doing this. I don't like super tall, super long rods because when you go to stroke it, you got to keep in mind that the distance your bait coming off the bottom is going to be related directly to your rod. So if you have like an 8-foot rod, you're really going to be bringing that bait off the bottom, which may be what you're after, but the way I stroke a jig, I'm getting my bait pretty high off the bottom anyways, so it's not a big issue for me. From a reel perspective, this is an Abu Garcia Revo ALF 8.0 to 1 gear ratio. So it's a fast reel, and the reason you want a fast reel is so that when you stroke it, most of those bites are going to come, you know, at the top of that stroke. And when that happens, what that means is you're going to have a lot of slack line. So you want to reel down to the fish, and the faster gear ratio reel allows me to pick up line faster, so when I go to set the hook, I'm going to be able to set the hook faster and catch up to that fish and not have nearly as much slack line. So that's the rod and reel. From a bait choice, you can pretty much stroke almost any bait that's out there. I really do like to do a jig because they hold up much better than, say, if you were doing a Texas rig, because when you really snap it hard off the bottom with a Texas rig, a lot of times that the bait will slide off it and just not, you know, be weedless on that cast. So from a jig perspective, I like to go more on the casting side of jigs. You know, this is a dirty jig casting jig, a Luke Clausen casting jig. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, the weed guard's a little softer. I like the O'Shaughnessy hook in it. And more importantly, the line tie is parallel with the hook shank. And what that does is that means that is going to come through the weeds better. If you had one that was perpendicular to the hook shank, that perpendicular eye will get caught up in the weeds more. Definitely not as important if you're fishing just a ledge, you know, shell bars, rock bars, because it's not going to be nearly as important. But if you're fishing grass, I really recommend going with a parallel hook eye. So I recommend a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce. It's really based on how deep you're fishing. You want a quicker fall. You want to fall, you know, so it's going to hit the bottom, you stroke it, and it goes back to the bottom quicker than it would if it were a lighter jig. You want that faster fall to create that reaction strike. And in this case, you know, I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce, which is not a huge jig, but I'm using a 1/2 ounce because I'm only fishing 8 to 12 foot of water. If I was fishing 20, I would for sure be throwing a 3/4 ounce. For a trailer, in this case, I'm using a Berkley Chigger Craw. I want a less bulky trailer with one that won't give me a ton of lift. you know, a chigger craw's got a lot of motion in the flaps, but it's not going to hold that bait up from falling too much. If you had a bait that had a lot more of like a helicopter fall to it, where it had a ton of kicking motion, it would slow that fall up on the bait. And again, I'm not going for that. I want a faster fall. So, you know, the chigger craw is a good bait for it. The pit boss is a good bait for it. You know, the max scent creature hog is another one. Beavers, that type of bait that gives you a little bit faster fall is really what you're looking for. So that's the setup, guys. It's a, you know, you can go out and snap anything you want and stroke a bait through the weeds, but if you don't have the right setup, you're going to spend a lot of time fixing your bait and getting caught in the weeds. So the key to this, and I'm going to show you how to do it, the key is really to throw it out, let it hit the bottom on a semi slack line, what I call a controlled slack line. And then when you go to snap it, the whole key is you want to create an explosion off the bottom. So when you do that, I like to go from slack line to stroking it, and that's going to create that explosion. If I used the tight line when I stroked it, you wouldn't get the same explosion. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and let's just start fishing, see if we can catch some. October 2nd, and we're fishing summer patterns in northern Wisconsin. Crazy. Fire one out. I'm gonna keep my rod tip high. I engage the reel. I'm letting it fall on a nice tight, not tight slack line, but a controlled slack line. And I'm watching it for to do one of two things. Go flat, which means it hits the bottom, which is what it just did, or for it to, you know, give me a pop, which indicates there's a bite. So you want to watch your line, because you're going to have one of two things happen. It's going to go flat, which means it's on the bottom, and you should stroke again, or you get a bite, which means you should set the hook. So you really need to be watching your line, because a lot of your bites are not coming, you're not going to feel them in the rod, because those bites that you're feeling in the rod you'd see anyways through your line. So you're better off just watching your line. But when you got so much slack, you're just not going to feel all the bites. It's just not going to happen, which is why it's so much more important to watch your line. So we're going to let it fall. We're going to do it all over again. I mean, that's really what it is. It's just cast and repeat. But you really want to pay close attention to what's going on in your line. So, you know, I'm watching it. You're seeing it, you know, drop, which means I'm on the bottom. But after I stroke, it's so important to keep your rod tip high, because that's what gives you your bow and your slack line. You're not doing anything to the fall of your bait, but you're enabling yourself to see if you did get a bite, which is super important, because you're not in a good position if you didn't feel the bite or see the bite and you go to stroke at that point and there's a fish on it. You just like half set the hook is kind of what you did. And you could end up losing a lot of those fish. So that's not the situation you want to be in. It's not good. So you really do want to pay close attention to your line. So you can throw it out just like I did, you know, every other cast. You throw it out, engage your reel, keep your rod tip high. In this case, the line went slack. You're just going to give it a nice big stroke again. What you're trying to do is recreate the fall on the cast. You know, a lot of your bites will come on that initial fall from your cast, but this is basically enabling you to get like, you know, 15 initial falls from an initial cast. You know, I definitely think a lot of your bites come on that first fall with any bait. So if you can, you know, create lots of additional falls on a cast, you're just covering a lot of water with that kind of that big snap where the fish are, you know, kind of not expecting it. And when they see it, they got to jump on it because they're, you know, taken by surprise, and it's their reaction. So they're going for it, which is one reason why it's such a good process for fishing areas that either, you know, have a ton of pressure or just have fish that are not real active. It just triggers them. And it's a really good way, if you find a school of fish, it's a really good way to trigger that first one to bite, which will enable you to catch more out of that school. You know, I'm fishing a break line. You can see the boat's in about 20. Here's some grass on the weed line that's in about 14, which is where it ends. So that's where I'm getting my fish. That actually looks like a fish right there. So we're gonna see. I'll throw one in front of the boat, see if we can get bit on that cast. All right, you fire it out. You let it hit the bottom. So I'm watching my line. I've caught it, my rod tip up high, so I'm keeping that bow in it. We just had a bite. There he is. That one feels pretty good. Yeah, that's a good one. Ooh. I mean, that's a nice bass right there. That's what we're after. You know, nice 3.5 pounder probably. We're gonna fire it back. I hit my GPS lock. Fire it out. Do the same thing, guys. That one hit on the fall again. You know, throw it out. We're gonna let it fall. My line just went slack. Hopefully there's a few more there. All right, you fire it out. Gauge your reel, keep your rod tip high. We got bit on that one. There's one. Not a big one. And a lot of your bites are gonna come on the fall like that one did. There you have it, guys. That is how you stroke a jig. Get out and try it. It's gonna catch you a few extra fish on those days that are tough. I'm telling you, it's a great way to catch a big fish too. We were able to catch a couple of fish for you, so I hope it was helpful. If it was, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I gotta get back to the house. We got some family stuff to take care of, so I'll talk to you later, guys.